What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with World's Finest, Batman and Superman fighting the new Joker. So, in the last video that we did, Joker and Lex Luthor had fused into one being and then taken the Absorbiscan, basically a device that allowed them to absorb all knowledge across the world and then give that knowledge to other people. And they have revealed to the world the identities of Batman and Superman, because lest we forget, World's Finest takes place in the early days of their antics as superheroes. So Commissioner Gordon, he learns that Bruce Wayne is Batman and Clark Kent is Superman. And that's what they say here, right? My God, Bruce, they know. And Batman says, I can see that, Clark. Thanks to Joker and Luthor, the whole world knows what our secret identities are. And so Superman says, get the Absorbiscan, right? They can learn anything with it. And the Joker says, 2-1 against 2-1. House Soups against magic, Lex. And Lex Luthor just says, helpless, Mr. J. And Joker just says, perfect. And so at that point, he starts casting spells based on knowledge that he had taken from a combination of Dr. Fate and Zatanna. Just like that. Right, Joker and Luthor, just by way of the Absorbiscan, have become two of the most powerful beings in the entirety of DC Comics. They've literally just got like Superman, Batman, their fusion full spread, and there's no real means of escape. And so at that point, Joker ends up casting a disappearing spell unintentionally, right? His intention is to make Superman and Batman disappear, but ultimately makes himself and Lex Luthor disappear. But that's where Superman just says, right, they've gone, right? And that's our next problem. Right now, we've got to get free faster than fast, Bruce. Lives are at stake. There's already fallout from the identity reveal. Villains are converging on Wayne Manor. A very angry Poison Ivy is about to take her hate for Batman out on Alfred. And so he says, you're the escape artist, Bruce. Do your thing. And Bruce just tells him, stop straining, right? We have to relax our muscles like slipping off a straitjacket. And that's exactly what happens, right? They slip out of this and they get to Alfred right before Poison Ivy kills him. Now understand, this is kind of a crazy display of speed here, right? Like notice this. Alfred is a moment away from being killed, a hair's breadth away from being killed. So Superman and Batman get from their location to Alfred within a fraction of a second, like the speed of thought. It's crazy how fast they're going here, right? And so Superman just says, right, just barely in the nick of time, he says, how confused is poor Alfred right now? And Batman just says, he'll recognize us, right? I told him about the first time that we fused together. And he says, right now, he's more concerned about securing Wayne Manor and barricading himself in the Batcave as per protocol. And he says, Ivy will not be the last enemy out for my blood now that they know. How are your people doing? And that's where Superman just says, right, Ma and Pa, they've got access to the fortress in case of emergencies. But at the planet, poor Lois, right? And this moment right here just shows how much of a dick Batman is. Because Batman's response after getting to Alfred and saving Alfred's life from Poison Ivy, because Poison Ivy was going after Alfred and that kind of thing, Lois Lane is just out there at the Daily Planet, and seemingly because now people know that she's associated with Superman, they'll start gunning for her. What does Batman say, right? What does he say, right? We'll get to her, I swear, okay? Right now, Luthor and Joker merged are potentially far more dangerous than they are apart. So it's important to save Alfred. Batman's like, oh, we gotta save Alfred, we gotta save Alfred. But as soon as Superman, has somebody that needs to be saved, well, we'll get to it when we get a chance. Superman, we got more important things to worry about right now. Batman is a prick. I'm just throwing it out there. Batman's a terrible person, right? But that's where he says, so long as they possess a device that can absorb knowledge from anywhere, they're the most dangerous threat on the planet right now. And that's where Hawkman tells Batman and Superman, right? It's worse than you think. Adam and I have been observing. Now that Luthor's rewired the Absorbiscan, it's practically limitless, right? Because now the League is unified on the Watchtower. And Hawkgirl says, right, we have no idea what absorbing that amount of information could do to your brain, let alone your sanity. And she says, vengeance, blackmail, planetary manipulation, it's all on the table. Because one of the things to remember here is the Absorbiscan is a device associated with Hawkman and Hawkgirl, and their entire history, and so they're very familiar with it. The issue is that it's not very often used, and when it is used, it's just used by like one guy, right, who just does something. But having Joker and Lex Luthor fused into one person, and then the device being used on a fused brain composed of two different people, who knows what the effects are going to be? And that's where Adam says, right, the Hawks are right. I am able to get an occasional ping off that device, but that's not yet enough to trace it. We will let you know the second we manage. And Flash and Green Lantern are working on restoring your corporeal bodies so you don't have to stay fused. And he says, in the meantime, do what the whole league is doing. Prepare yourselves for the worst. And so at that point, you end up jumping to the Keystone Mental Hospital, right, which is permanently closed, has been for quite some time. But Lex Luthor is just like, really? Here? Right? He's like, I have far more suitable hideouts, Joker. And the Joker's just like, you hosted last time. Besides, this reminds me of home, right? And he just kind of looks at the skeleton. He's like, Mom, is that you? Right? Just being crazy, right? Just Joker being a crazy guy, right? And Lex just says, right, enough, right? We're on the precipice of boundless intellect. And he says, I get it, right? You want to be the smartest man in the world. And Lex just says, that's not a goal. That's a Wednesday. I'm always the smartest man in the world. And he says, I simply wish to exponentially enhance that role, to be hundreds of times smarter than even the most brilliant of minds. And so Joker says, then let's do it. Right, let's really floor that pedal. And he says, I've got this, Lexi. Your wish is my command. And so at that point, you jump to Metropolis and you pick up with Batman and Superman meeting with Lois. Now, this is entirely a Superman moment, right? The Superman personality in this fusion is really the one addressing this because, again, this is the early days. And so when he shows up, right, Superman's just kind of like, hi. Right? And he says, it's all right, Lois. It's me. It's just complicated. And she asks, right, how do I know that it's really you? And he says, Christmas last year, I gave you rainbow earrings from the Beetlejuice system. You gave me a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird, one of the greatest books ever written in the history of the human race. And she says, because Clark suggested it. And so he just asks, right, can we talk? You must have some questions. And he tells her, right, you know, everything that I say is off the record. And so he asks, how are you feeling? And she says, lousy, confused, used, right? Take your pick. How could you do it? For years, Jimmy, Perry, how could you keep that from us, from me? And she says, I thought that we were close. Now, it's like I don't know you at all, either of you. And this is a really fascinating way that this is shown in terms of like how Lois reacts here. Because in years past, right, for example, Action Comics 484, when Superman reveals his, or really when Lois learns that Superman is Clark Kent, it's one of these things where they're on a honeymoon when she's married to Clark, she doesn't know he's Superman, and she doesn't really take it as like a personal affront, right? It's more just like, I haven't hit him with a big question yet. How am I going to ask him? How am I going to confront him with this? It's not outright anger and feelings of betrayal. Now, that has kind of changed over the years because DC's continuity has been reworked so many times over the years, but it's not like this celebratory moment that you would expect it to be. She's angry and she feels betrayed, right? Where she says, I thought you were all about truth. You say that you never lie. And he says, and I don't. First, I'm really good at avoiding the question. Fortunately, not a lot of people think to walk up to Clark Kent and ask, are you Superman? But I would never look you or anyone in the eye and simply say no. He says, I would laugh off the question, or turn it around, or set off the sprinkler system with my heat vision, or dodge it in a dozen other ways. I'm sorry, when I put it like that, it sounds like a game, but it's not. I hate not being open with you. And he says, but secrecy is not the same thing as privacy, Lois. All of us show different sides of ourselves depending on who we are with. I do not hide behind glasses to laugh at people. I do it so I can be around them without the suit coming between us, so I can be less lonely. And it's a really phenomenal and interesting way to see Superman. It's why I say Mark Waid's phenomenal when it comes to writing the character of Superman as opposed to like stories involving Superman doing super things. Mark Waid's good at that, but when it comes to a character dissection of what makes Superman Superman, he's almost second to none. Because what you're looking at here is you're looking at this scenario where it really hits home at the idea that at the end of the day, no matter how he dresses, no matter how he acts, no matter how many times he saves the world, Superman is not human. He knows that. And And he's reminded of that every single day. But more so than any of that, the instant someone sees the blue suit and the S on the front, their entire demeanor changes. And so it's a really cool concept, right? Because Lois just responds and she says, I hear you. Right? I don't necessarily forgive you, but I do hear you. And Superman just says, I am devastated that you found out this way. I've told you 1,000 times in my dreams, and I managed to do it in a way where you understand. But that's where Lois actually kind of hits at the bigger point, and she says, but it's not just about me. Wherever we go from here, Superman, I'm sorry for your loss. And he just says, thank you. So it's a really interesting moment because now she knows the whole story behind Superman, right? The end of Krypton and all that kind of stuff. But it's not simply knowing that information, it's also feeling that information. And so when they take off, Batman just says, we can fix this, Clark, and we will. Secrets or no, Robin, Alfred, and I will survive, but I am not going to let you lose Lois. And so at that point, the Flash and Green Lantern chime into Batman as Superman, right? And they say, this is Green Lantern. We have hope, fellas. Flash here thinks that he can reconstruct some of the dematerialization tech that Joker stole to start this whole mess, which is actually what kind of led to Joker and Lex Luthor fusing in the first place. And he says, but it'll take time, even for him. We will keep you posted. But in the middle of that, Hal Jordan forgets how to use his ring. Right? He doesn't know how to use it. Not only that, you switch over to Star City, right? You've got Green Arrow and Roy Harper. And Roy just says, Arrow, shoot, right? They're getting away. And Green Arrow doesn't remember how to shoot anymore. And that's when you switch back over to Lex and Joker. It's a genius scheme, right? Lex asks, what's happening? Why aren't we learning anything? And that's where Joker just says, Lexi, here's the thing. Why bother with brains when you have beauty? And that's where Lex says, I knew that we could not share this device. Your insanity is contaminating it. But that's not actually what's going on here, right? And in fact, Lex asks, what is it doing? And Joker just says, what I said, basically, he says, absorbing and processing all those facts and figures is so much work. New take, if we can force 7 billion people to forget literally everything they know, they become gibbering, drooling idiots for our amusement. Extra bonus, global chaos and corpses everywhere. I love it. And that's the crazy thing, because Lex Luthor realizes you're not making us smarter, you're making them dumber, and you're more insane than I'd ever imagine. But this is astronomically dangerous, right? Surgeons are forgetting how to operate on people in the middle of a surgery. People who keep control of like nuclear facilities are forgetting how to control them. Meltdowns are happening. Pilots are forgetting how to fly, right? The world is quickly coming to an end. Chaos is ensuing, and the mass of life is catastrophic, despite the efforts of Batman and Superman. Because while they're in Nebraska, right, Batman kind of looks at everybody and says, those bystanders, they don't remember what to do in the face of a tornado. And Superman recognizes it, right? He says, it's headed for the town too. We'll take care of it. A counterspin will tear it apart. Now, this is an interesting moment because Batman asks, right? He says, isn't it easier to relocate the people than to save the whole block? But Superman just says, I've got a soft spot for small towns, right? It comes from Smallville. It makes perfect sense. And so he says, disasters like this are happening worldwide. Even we cannot be everywhere at once. And so he says, Adam, we need to fix the Absorbiscon. And so Adam responds and he says, I found it, but you've got to move now, right? It turns out it's not built to service two brains at once. It's burning out. And if it goes, we cannot reverse any of this. So if you've got a plan, make it so, because we are out of time. And so once Batman and Superman show up to confront Joker and Lex says, right, I'm taking full control, right? Like, you have no clue what you're doing, Joker. You're literally making everything screwed up because you yourself are a crazy screwed up guy. But Joker just says, right, let's see you try, right? He says, when we teamed up, did you really expect me to play fair? But again, Lex fires back, right? It's shorting out. You've cost me ultimate knowledge, clown, and you will pay. Right? And so that's where he says, Joker, for the last time, surrender command. Only I can save us. So they're literally going back and forth and back and forth. Not only that, the Absorbiscon is starting to overload, right? It's literally starting to go haywire. And so ultimately he starts firing energy blasts, right, at Batman and Superman. And Joker just says, please tell me kryptonite is not his only weakness. And Lex Luthor says, as it happens, red sun radiation works nicely too. And so Joker goes into Batman and Superman's mind and says, let's see what else is in that alien head of yours. Alter egos galore. Barry Allen, Hal Jordan, Oliver Queen, the strategies of the Metropolis police force, the cell codes at Arkham, all of them are ours now. All because you can't fight someone who constantly knows your next move. And so that's where Batman and Superman just say, so what we do next doesn't matter, Lex. And so at that moment, Batman just says, it's what we've already done behind your back. Because while the Absorbiscon is incredibly powerful, it can be tricked, especially when the person is exclusively focusing on one individual and is not focusing on anything else if they're caught up in the moment. And that's exactly what Adam does, right? He literally jumps off of Batman and Superman, or had jumped off Batman and Superman. He had gotten into the Absorbiscon and then grows and removes it from Lex and Joker. And then at that point, they slap the device back onto Lex and Joker's back that essentially takes away their combined form, right? It removes the fusion. And so in that moment, the Atom just says, right, I thought you would never get here. And Flash just says, timing is everything. Nice work, right? Because he's the one that got here in time to slap the device on Lex and Joker's back. And so that's where Batman and Superman, who are no longer fused, just kind of look on. And they're just like, it worked, right? And he says, I'm solid, right? What about you, Superman? And Superman's like, I mean, I kind of regret it, but yeah. He's like, we did it. Looks like everyone's back to normal. Only for the two of them to find out they're standing in front of this physically fused form of the two of them. So seemingly it's taken on a body of its own. Now it's not acting, it's not doing anything, it's just standing there, right? And that's where Batman's just like, that's new, right? If we're divided, then what is that? And Superman just says, right, I couldn't tell you, but it is coming with us. We're not going to just let this thing sit out here in the world, because who in the hell knows what it's going to do? And so that's the cool thing, because at that point you switch to Hawkman and he says there, right, it took some doing, but the genies are back in their respective bottles. All the world's information is back where it belongs, not in the heads of two sociopathic villains. He says, unless there's more that you would like to drain from their minds. And Batman just says, no, right? It's tempting, but brain surgery is a line that I am not ready to cross. And Superman says, right, just take that thing and throw it into the sun. And so you kind of get this banter between the two, right? Batman says, so much for watching a football game in peace. I swear, everything with you is an adventure. And the response of Superman, right? He says, me? It's your guy who started all of this. And he just asks, like, are you smiling? Right? This is one of the reasons why World's Finest is so amazing. It's such an amazing comic. It's just a team-up book between Batman and Superman, right? And so Superman just says, did part of me stick with the grim avenger of the night? And Batman's just like, that's what the aspirin's for. And just like goes to take off, right? And he says, I suppose this is the part where I say there's no one else that I would trust to share a consciousness with, but it's not a facade, is it? You really do have a dark view of the world, Bruce. And Bruce is like, I mean, certainly compared to you, but I would argue you could stand to be a little more guarded. But if we're lucky, maybe I left behind a tip or two on street fighting that's way overdue. And he says, look, next to Alfred and Robin, you're my best friend, but I think we share enough as it is. A mind meld like that is too much. I vote that we never do that again, ever. And Superman's like, agreed, right? So the fusion anomaly is basically locked up here. And he says, unless we absolutely have to. So it's Mark Waid telling us it's probably going to come back. It's probably going to happen again, because it's been exceedingly popular up to this point. But with that being said, guys, we're going to bring this to an end. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like. Thank you all for watching, and I will catch you all later. Peace.